Hello, good day everyone. This is Jo Bren, yours truly. So for today's blog I'll be discussing to you our lesson number 4 in the subject of Philippine Indigenous People and Development. But before I'll start, I would like to say hi. Hi everyone. Hi to all my subscribers. Thank you so much for all your support. So if you want to send support for my channel, you can also click the super thanks button. You can just click it to show your support to my channel. Thank you so much. So my channel discusses a lot of things. My channel discusses some psychology related subject or some social science subjects. So if you are interested to get to know more about this one, if you are interested to get more knowledge or ideas about social sciences, so please do like, share, and subscribe to my channel to get more updates and to inspire others to do the same thing, to be part of our channel. Okay, so welcome to our lesson 4 discussion in the subject of the Philippine Indigenous People and Ethno-Development. So for today's blog I'll be introducing to you some basic concept when you talk about development, and we will try to engage into a more deeper understanding about indigenous people and development. So we will be talking about their basic concept, the two differing perspective when you talk about development. So what is really the meaning of development? So I know when you hear the word development, it's quite easy for us to explain that it's more about developing yourself. It's more about just a very simple word. Okay, but when you talk about development has different fields, and they defined it differently. So the way I define development is not the same thing as the way you define your own development. So meaning when you talk about development, it means differently to different groups of people. So that's why we have two differing perspectives when you talk about development, because we are talking about our own perspective, our own definition when you talk about development. That's why the concept of development is always associated with, when you talk about economic progress, when you talk about development, you are talking about progress. You are talking about the growth, the infrastructure, the high technology, and many more. And when you think about that, when you define development the same as economic progress, growth, you are talking about the first world's perspective. So that is the first world's perspective, because you are talking about the buildings, the infrastructure, the high technology. So according to the United Nations Development Program, or the UNDP, that when you talk about development, it provides a human development approach. So it is not all about the buildings. It is not all about the infrastructures, the high technology. When you talk about development, we'll also be talking about people, about human beings, about the development of human beings. So it is not only limited to the richness of economy. So when you talk about development, according to UNDP, development is not only limited to the richness of economy, but they also try to expand the richness of human life, and that is development. Okay, you are not only limited to the richness of an economy, but one that also seeks to expand the richness of human life. And I think that's a very good definition when you talk about development. Okay, so I am also developing myself, as well as my society is also developing. Okay, so UNDP highlights 3 essential components that need to be satisfied in order to achieve authentic human development. So according to UNDP, in order for us to achieve authentic human development, so I am also developing myself, there are 3 aspects that we need to address. Number 1 aspect is the people. So when you talk about the people, we are talking about us. So it's not all about the infrastructure, the high technology. When you talk about development, we'll be talking about people. Okay, so the human development approach focuses on improving the lives of the people. So when you talk about we have higher economy, we have an increasing growth of our economy, make sure that we're also dealing with the people. Okay, are the people having a good life? Okay, so that is the main idea of human development approach. We are trying to improve the lives of people. So let's talk about that. We should always remember that the core of any development program are the human beings. Meaning we are the center of any development because we are affected by the things that are happening around us. So we are the center of the development programs. So it should contribute to the overall well-being of human beings in a society. So therefore, when you talk about development, we should also focus on ourselves. If we are also developing, we should also develop ourselves because we are the center of any development programs implemented because we are affected by it. Right? Do you agree with me? We are affected by all the development programs that is being implemented. We as the people. Okay, the second component that we need to address to achieve authentic human development is number 2 is opportunities. So when you talk about opportunities, meaning as human, we should live a life of freedom to develop ourselves more, to develop our full potential. We need to engage into a lot of opportunities, a lot of job opportunities to maximize our full potential. That's why we are studying. That's why education plays an important role in developing ourselves, in giving off opportunities. Because today, if you are well educated, if you have a good educational background, there are a lot of opportunities opening for you, right? For us to become a good member of the society, we need to open ourselves to a much bigger opportunities. We should not close ourselves just here. We should be open to any opportunity. We should live a life of freedom, a freedom to do our best, a freedom to do the things that we love, and a freedom to become a productive members of society. Okay, the third one is in order for us to achieve authentic human development is number 3. The last one is choices. So when you talk about choices, this is anchored on the idea of human flourishing. When you talk about choices, is we should be given more life choices. We should be given more choices to choose from. We should be given a life that is full of options. We should not stick to only one option. We should stick to a bigger option so that we can explore things. So because human flourishing is only possible if people are given more life choices. If we are not given a lot of life choices, we are stuck here. We are just staying to what we are doing. We are not exploring things. And that is part of our choices, because if you can still remember that life is a choice, and it is our choice to be at our own best, to live a good life. It is our choice to be a good member of a society. So we should be given more life opportunities to develop our full potential and to live a productive and creative lives. Okay, so it's nice to live in a more productive and creative life. Meaning if we are given more life choices, we can think a lot. We can decide on what is best. We can do a lot of things for us. And we can assess if that is a good choice or not a good choice for us. Okay? So UNDP positive levels of human development, these things should be addressed. Number 1, development should enhance human abilities such as long and healthy life, knowledge, and a decent standard of living. So for us to achieve a positive levels of human development, we should live a long and healthy life and a decent standard of living. So for us to be a good person, for us to become a good member of a society, to have a good human development, we should enhance our human abilities. We should excel, we should achieve, or we should live a long and healthy life on a decent standard way of living. The number two, in order for us to achieve a positive level of human development, is to participate in any political and community life. So we have a lot of communities now, and we have our own church community, our social community, our friends community. So we should participate for us to achieve a positive level of human development. Because if you are not able to participate with that, possibly you are stuck to what you are doing. You are not exploring things out. You are not developing yourself better. Because if you are not developing yourself better, there are things that you don't know. There are things that people would also tell you to do something good for yourselves. Because we need each other to achieve a positive levels of human development. Okay, so that is the idea of UNDP. If you really wanted to achieve a positive levels of human development, learn to participate in political and community life, enable them to live in a sustainable environment. So you need to have full access to basic human rights. You need to go out, to live, to have a social interaction with others, because it's nice to blend in. It's nice to get some important information by other people, and from there you can also get something out of a very quick discussion, right? So we need to participate and in any political community and in any political and community life, especially our social life. Okay. So the human development approach of UNDP is very focused on developing people. Let's try to make it simple. The UNDP acknowledges human development, and the only way for us to achieve a positive level of human development is to transform ourselves to become a better person. So how can we transform ourselves to become a better person? We need to participate. We need to collaborate, and we need to have a community life that would enable us to become a productive member of the society. Because development is not focusing on yourself alone. Development is also focusing on the people that surrounds us. Right? When we were still young, we were taught by our parents on how to do good things, right? And they are part of our environment. And they are the ones who taught us a lot of things. And that is the reason why we are doing this kind of things. Because they are teaching us to do that way. They are transforming us to become a better person. They are transforming us to become a more productive member of society. And that is the same idea with human development by UNDP. Okay, so it is very important to consider development a social and cultural change. So we cannot tell that when you talk about development, it's all about me. When you talk about development, we're also focusing on social and cultural change. So we need to interact, we need to participate, and we need to embrace a lot of cultures for us to become a productive member of society. It is not just economic growth. Yes, when you talk about development, part of it, we have economic growth, a lot of buildings, infrastructure, but it's not all about that one. Because when you talk about development, the people, or we as human beings, are also affected by the series of development. Our attitudes, our motives, our values and norms of the members of a particular society, we are affected. That's why nowadays social media is very famous, because we are affected. As human beings, we are affected. We follow what is trending. We do the things that are famous, and we try to follow them. Right? Because our values, our attitudes is also affected by the things that are happening around us. What have you noticed in the historical processes concerning development? So what happened to the natives as colonizers were trying to expand their economy. So those are the different questions that we are trying to answer when you talk about the lives of Philippine indigenous people. Okay, so let's try to explore that one so that we will have a short glimpse on what is going to happen with them. Okay, take note that indigenous people, not just from the Philippines, but even from the different parts of the globe, they are calling for recognition. They are calling for promotion, respect of the indigenous way of life. Yes, we have our brothers and sisters as part of the indigenous people. They are preserving their own culture. They are trying to preserve the things that they value the most. However, despite the Declaration of Rights, they have the rights, including the right to development. The indigenous people remain, they remain socially and economically marginalized. So they are considered victims of progress. So why they are considered the victims of progress? Because of the different development programs, we are trying to use their own culture. Indigenous people are victims in different ways and degrees. They are victims because they are suffering because of the different development programs. So Bodley argued that the expansion of societies, the markets, the economics are potentially reducing the human well-being of indigenous people. Yes, we need expansion, we need them, it's good for us, but we should also consider that there are people like indigenous people who are trying to preserve their own culture. And as what you can see, it also affects them. It negatively transforms their social cultural systems and ecosystem that support these people. Therefore, because of the progress, sometimes our indigenous people, they're also affected by it. Their values, their norms, their attitudes, their beliefs, it is also affected. That's why, according to John H. Bodley, we need to include our indigenous people for any development programs because they are the ones who are greatly affected by any development, especially if you are trying to develop their own land or natural resources. So they are the one concept. No, it is very important for us to get to know some forms of development intervention. So there are a lot of development intervention that try to pave the way to culture change, and sometimes there are also development intervention that can also destroy some of the culture of an ethnic group. So we can't deny that one, that yes, there are portion of our programs that sometimes it also affected the rights of our indigenous people. Okay, so number one form of development program is the assimilationist policies. So we can't deny the fact that Filipino indigenous people are currently struggling, yes, especially when they are faced to adapt to some modernization. When you talk about modernization, we are forcing them to change their old ways. We are forcing them to engage into our own system. Okay, even if they don't like it, because it will result in the loss of their own culture. So they need to accept the fact that that's why they are struggling. That's why we have these so-called assimilationist policies. Okay, so they are not exempted from the challenges faced by many IPs nowadays. So they are struggling. The number two form of development intervention is accumulation by dispossession. Meaning, as what you know, that the Philippines is very rich in natural resources. Yes, but most of these are located in areas where indigenous people live. When you talk about accumulation by dispossession is when you are trying to change the traditional ways of indigenous people to adapt to a new ways. So that is a very simple definition when you talk about accumulation by dispossession. We are trying to change their own traditional ways to our new ways. So that is accumulation by dispossession. A positive and negative. So that is when you talk about indigenous people, we should also consider the win-win solution. It is beneficial for them, and it could also be beneficial for us. So we should just respect one another, because we are just the same. We are humans, and we also wanted to achieve a positive level of human development. Okay, the number 3 is the development intervention for IPs. Sometimes they also experience neglect and discrimination. So we can't deny the fact that they're also experiencing that, because they are not part of it. Sometimes that we tend to neglect and discriminate indigenous people. So we need to change that. Part of the process is to integrate the indigenous economy into the mainstream of economy, pattern after a globally defined economy. So we should include our indigenous people if you are planning something, if we are trying to develop something, because they are the ones who are greatly affected by it, especially if you are trying to use their land or their own cultural aspect. Okay, so we need to include them. The fourth one is cultural commoditization. So when you talk about cultural commoditization, according to Young, ethnic diversity is a blessing. It is a blessing, because when you talk about, if we are diverse with our culture, we can do more. Like for this one, the cultural commoditization. Okay, so we are using this one. For example, for our tourism, we are trying to use the culture of our indigenous people to share it to others for our tourism, for our promotion, right? So cultural commoditization refers to the tagging or making a portion of a host culture available for guest consumption. And this is quite prevalent in the Philippines now, where the government, where we are using indigenous cultures to promote tourism. Yes, that's part of cultural commoditization. And it is a blessing, because the same thing that our indigenous people are experiencing some monetary purposes, at the same time our government is also experiencing some monetary purposes. So because of this idea, there are a lot of things that are happening now. There are a lot of things. So that's why the IPRA, or the Indigenous People Rights Act of 1997, they provided a necessary provision that will guide development intervention. Okay, so because of this idea, so the IPRA, or the Indigenous People Rights Act of 1997, provided some guidelines. So it also clearly states that the right of the IPs, that the indigenous people has its own right to accept, to reject a certain development, activity, or undertaking in their community. So they have the right to accept, reject, or to accept, reject any development program that is implemented in the community. Unfortunately, we have insufficient information about them, and we have very limited understanding about indigenous people's condition. We have very, very limited idea when you talk about indigenous people. So this is very crucial, no, in the implementation and success of development intervention intended for indigenous people. Since we don't have information, we don't know them, we don't clearly understand their condition, so sometimes we don't really know what is a good thing to do for them. So aside from the lack of information, there are a lot of project failures implemented due to inappropriate measure for indigenous people, because we don't know them. We don't have a background about them. So indigenous people, they are just treated as passive recipients, meaning they are not part of the process, why they are also suffering. And that is the reason why we are encountering a lot of project failure when you talk about the lives of indigenous people and development. So to make the program successful for indigenous people, for me, indigenous people should be part from planning to implementation to evaluation. So we should include them. We should encourage them to be part of our program. So this is to ensure the suitability of the project to the needs and conditions of the target recipients. We need to include them because they are the ones who are greatly affected, especially the indigenous people. On the one hand, culture should be the core in recognizing indigenous people's rights. We have our own culture. You also have your own culture. So we should include that culture. We should include that culture. Indigenous people have their own culture, values, beliefs. We should include that. We should include the right to development and well-being. It is part. So on the other hand, if the objective of development is to produce sustained change, it is essential to emphasize the significance of situating culture in the development framework. So we need to include culture in any development programs. We need to understand their own culture, especially for indigenous people, to have a better development programs for them that is suited for their own needs, for their own human and well-being development. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you get something out of this very quick discussion. Thank you so much. And I'll see you again for my next video blog for lesson 5. Thank you and God bless.